Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Hari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Hari Yashodanandana Brajajanarandana Yashodanandana Brajajanarandana Jamunatira Vanamsari Jamunatira Vanamsari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Hari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Hari Yashodanandana Brajajanarandana Yashodanandana Brajajanarandana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare Bolo. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Jaya Radha Madhava Radha Madhava Radhe Radha Madhava Radha Jaya Radha Madhava Radha Madhava Radhe Radha Jaya Radha Kunda Bihari Radha Kunda Bihari Radhe Radha Kunda Bihari Radha Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Gaura Premanandi Daim Vishipad Paramahamsa Pri Vrajagacharya Stotra Satta Sri Simad His Divine Grace Shilabhai Charanarvinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Skandi Biti Founder Acharya Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Samavata Bhakti Vrinda Ki Harinam Sankirtan Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jaini Tagore Pimanandi All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Guru, to Sri Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Daksurinmeritam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Juta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavam Syam Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalitam Sri Visakanvitam Syam Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kancana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Suti Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vansakalpa Trubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyaevacha Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Namaha Narayanam Namaskritya Dharam Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Dayamudiraye. Before reciting this Srimad Bhagavatam, let us first offer respectful obeisances unto Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta Prayasabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Tamashloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. By regularly hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering a service unto the pure devotee, all that is troublesome within the heart becomes destroyed practically to nil, and loving devotional service unto the Supreme Lord, who is praised with transcendental songs, becomes established as an irrevocable fact. Idam Bhagavatam Nama Puranam Brahmasamitam Uttamaśloka Charitam Chakara Bhagavan Rishi Nishreyasaya Lokasya Dhanyam Swasyayanam Mahat. This Srimad Bhagavatam, known as the Grantaraj, the king of all Vedic literatures, is the literary incarnation of God. It is compiled by the incarnation of God, the Srila Vyasadeva. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people. It is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhara, Sri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Surabhyay Namaha. Om Surabhyay Namaha. Om Surabhyay Namaha. Mukam karoti vachanam pangum langayate girim yatkripa tamaham bandhu Sri Gurum Dinataranam yatkripa tamaham bandhu Sri Gurum Dinataranam. Hare Krishna. Welcome to our daily Srimad Bhagavatam class, reading today from Canto number 7, chapter 3, entitled Hiranyakashipu's Plan to Become Immortal. And today we're reading text number 11. Anyatha idam vidhasye aham ayatha purvam ojasa kim anyay kala nirdhutai kalpante vaishnava adivihi anyatedam vidhasyeham ayatha purvam ojasa kim anyay kala nirdhutai kalpante vaishnavadibi anyatedam vidhasyeham ayatha purvam ojasa kim anyay kala nirdhutai kalpante vaishnavadibhi anyatedam vidhasyeham anyatha purvam ojasa Kim manyai kalanir Kalpante Vaishnavadibhi Anyatedam vidasyeham Ayata purvamojasa Kimmanyai kalanirdhutai Kalpante Vaishnavadibhi Anyatedam vidasyeham Ayatha purvamojasa Kimmanyai kalanirdhutai Kalpante Vaishnavadibhi Anyatedam vidhasyeham Ayata purvamojasa Kimmanyai kalanirdutai Kalpante Vaishnavadibhi. Mataji. Anyatedam vidyasyeham Ayata purvamojasa Kimmanyai kalanirdutai Kalpante Vaishnavadibhi. Anyatedam vidhasyeham Ayata purvamojasa Kimmanyai kalanirdutai Kalpante Vaishnavadibhi. Anyatha, just the opposite. Idam, this universe, vidhasye, shall make, aham, I, ayatha, inappropriate, purvam, as it was before, ojasa, by dint of the power of my austerity, kim, what use, anyai, with others, kalanir dhutai, vanquished in due course of time, kalpa ante, at the end of the millennium, Vaishnava Adibhi, with planets like Dhruvaloka or Vaikuntaloka. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. By dint of my severe austerities, this a little bit of background. These are words spoken by demigods to Lord Brahma, who have become very concerned about the austerities being performed by Hiranyakashipu, and they are conveying to Lord Brahma what is in the mind of Hiranyakashipu. By dint of my severe austerities, I shall reverse the results of pious and impious activities. I shall overturn all the established practices within this world. Even Dhruvaloka will be vanquished at the end of the millennium. Therefore, what is the use of it? I shall prefer to remain in the position of Brahma. God. Pagol, huh? Kindly repeat after me. By dint of my severe austerities, I shall reverse the results of pious and impious activities. I shall overturn all the established practices within this world. Even Dhruvaloka will be vanquished at the end of the millennium. Therefore, what is the use of it? I shall prefer to remain in the position of Brahma. Purport. Hiranyakashipu's demoniac determination was explained to Lord Brahma by the demigods, who informed him that Hiranyakashipu wanted to overturn all the established principles. After executing severe austerities, people within this material world are promoted to the heavenly planets. But Hiranyakashipu wanted them to be unhappy, suffering. Oh, we read that yesterday, right? Yeah, okay. Yeah, right. We'll continue reading the purport, then we'll... Suffering because of the diplomatic feelings of the demigods, even in the heavenly planets. He wanted those who were harassed in this world by material transactions to be unhappy for the same reason, even in the heavenly planets. Indeed, he wanted to introduce such harassment everywhere. One might ask how this would be possible, since the universal order has been established since time immemorial. But Hiranyakashipu was proud to declare that he would be able to do everything by the power of his tapasya. He even wanted to make the Vaishnava's position insecure. These are some of the symptoms of asuric determination. So as Prabhupada mentions here, such plans of demoniac personalities due to their being overly proud and not caring for established orders, they will speak such words which we can understand are simply words of a foolish person. One time Prabhupada was in the lecture, someone was, it was at the end of the lecture, and this was in Australia somewhere. Prabhupada was taking questions, and then one person was asking, what about someone who doesn't believe that he is suffering and is not afraid of death? Prabhupada immediately replied, he's a crazy fellow. One can speak so many things, but one cannot go against the established order, although one may speak very loudly, and as Hiranyakashipu is verbalizing here. So let's go to text 12. So the demigods continue here to address Lord Brahma. O Lord, we have heard from reliable sources that in order to obtain your post, Hiranyakashipu is now engaged in severe austerity. You are the master of the three worlds. Please, without delay, take whatever steps you deem appropriate. Purport. In the material world, a servant is provided for by the master, but is always planning how to capture the master's post. There have been many instances of this in history, especially in India during the Mohammedan rule. Many servants, by plans and devices, took over the posts of their masters. It is learned from Chaitanya literature that one big zamindar, Subudhi Rai, kept a Mohammedan boy as a servant. Of course, he treated the boy as his own child, and sometimes when the boy would steal something, the master would chastise him by striking him with a cane. There was a mark on the boy's back from this chastisement. Later, after that boy had, by crooked means, become Hussein Shah, Nawab of Bengal, one day his wife saw the mark on his back and inquired about it. The Nawab replied that in his childhood he had been a servant of Subudhi Rai, who had punished him because of some mischievous activities. Upon hearing this, the Nawab's wife immediately became agitated and requested her husband to kill Subudhi Rai. Nawab Hussain Shah, of course, was very grateful to Subudhi Rai and therefore refused to kill him. But when his wife requested him to turn Subudhi Rai into a Mohammedan, the Nawab agreed. Taking some water from his water pot, he sprinkled it upon Subudhi Rai and declared that Subudhi Rai had now become a Mohammedan. The point is that this Nawab had been an ordinary menial servant of Subudhi Rai, but was somehow or other able to occupy the supreme post of Nawab of Bengal. This is the material world. Everyone is trying to become master through various devices, although everyone is servant of his senses. Following this system, a living entity, although servant of his senses, tries to become master of the whole world. Hiranyakashipu was a typical example of this, and Brahma was informed by the demigods of his intentions. This is the position of the conditioned living entities in the material world when they are devoid of proper knowledge and understanding. This is everyone's disease actually in the material world, wanting to lord it over. And therefore competing with others and planning in so many different ways, as demonstrated here by Hiranyakashipu. Many years ago when Srila Prabhupada was visiting Japan, at that time they had met with very large printing company for printing, maybe it was Krishna book or a good amount of books. And Srila Prabhupada had personally met with the top agents. They had a big meeting. Japanese people are very cultured in the sense of being very polite, and all of them carry their what they call business card. You know, they have their name and their position, etc., like that. When you meet them, or when you see them, sometimes in public, they exchange their cards, and it takes them half an hour actually to offer their respects to one another. anyways, at that meeting, at the end of the meeting, all of the agents had left their business card on the table. And amongst those present at the meeting was one kind of maybe clerk type person. He was also hired in the company. He also had his business card. And he had gathered all the business cards to give them to Prabhupada. And then he very intentionally took his business card and put it on the top. Prabhupada noticed that, indicating and showing that, actually Prabhupada, I think, had asked him as he was doing that, what is your ambition in life? Or what is your goal? And so he had taken the card and put it on the top, indicating that one day I want to be the head of this company. I want to be the boss, So since time immemorial, this has been the situation in the material world, that when we forget our constitutional position as servants, even not only spiritually, we are meant to be servants. Jiver Swarup Hoy, Krishna Nitya Das. We are the Das means servants, one who is serving higher authority. But even materially, we are meant to serve or to abide by the established orders in the world. And it is only someone of the character and mindset of Hiranyakashipu, means the maniac mindset, who is trying to completely change this order. There are established systems or orders in the material world. When we go against these established orders, then we create all kinds of disturbances for ourselves and for general society. So therefore, one of the features or one of the aspects of dharma actually means what is the natural order. What is the natural order for the living entity, both spiritually as well as materially. And we have seen, especially in Kali Yuga, how people in different positions, when they misuse their position, just like even in the Vedic times, persons like King Vena. King Vena was born in a Kshatriya family. His father actually was very qualified, but due to some karmic reaction, he developed a demoniac mentality. And of course, he also belonged to the same family of Hiranyakashipu, we can say, being demoniac in nature. He also tried to stop or do away with all the Brahminical activities. That's why Brahminical culture is so essential because the Brahmanas are the ones who more clearly, more thoroughly understand what is meant to be the the order within society, how society is meant to be arranged, and those who are meant to execute or maintain that order within society, they are, of course, the Kshatriyas. So Hiranyakashipu was a Kshatriya, but who also had a lot of Vedic understanding, but unfortunately was against Vishnu. So this is the fate as will be described in this whole Leela. This is what happens to those who are on the bodily platform. Bodily platform means demoniac mentality. This we come to understand by reading the descriptions in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna describes the mind or the mood, the mentality and the activities of the divine and the demoniac. And therefore Krishna explains also in the Bhagavad Gita that these are the two paths, pravriti marga and nivriti marga. And purpose of life is to understand the difference between these two ways of living. Pravritim cha, nivritim cha, jana navidur asura. So the word asura is very much described and talked about in the Bhagavad Gita and in the Bhagavatam. All of us in the material world, to the extent that we don't know about or don't follow the principles of dharma, then our consciousness is impure, and we are in this way falling in the category of asuric mentality. So the whole mission of the Lord actually is to reestablish the mentality of suras or divine consciousness, and he descends in the material world primarily for that purpose. And it also is meant to become the main focus and attention of those who are claiming to be dharmic. And because the subject matter of dharma is actually very, very involved and very profound subject matter, if we are not properly giving attention to the subject matter of what is dharma and how to apply dharma in our lives, then we will not get the proper desired result. So this section of the Bhagavatam, of course, is describing what happens when someone like Hiranyakashipu, who is a very demoniac in nature, creates such a situation in the universe that that even great personalities like the demigods become disturbed by his activities, as well. So the whole Bhagavatam is helping us understand about these principles of dharma, and in many ways something which is very much lacking in modern day society. When we speak of of leaders, actual leader is someone who has been trained. There's a whole very detailed description of how a leader is meant to be trained to develop the needed qualities to understand what is dharma, and then to to properly apply these principles of dharma. Yesterday we were mentioning how when such leaders are absent, then the citizens are actually not safe. I think many of you know that in the early days, Srila Prabhupada actually had a plan. Had a plan means he had allowed devotees to start a political party. Anyone know what that political party was named? Huh? Yes. If you've seen the U.S. currency, on the paper of the on the dollar, American dollar, it is written, "In God We Trust." So somehow the devotees had chosen that name to call their political party. It had gone on for some time, and Prabhupada had told them, "You just preach from the platform of the Bhagavatam. You just preach from the basic the basic principles, just like we will see later on in the 7th canto, in this canto beginning from chapter 11, when Narada Muni gives a whole presentation and explanation on dharma. He begins in that 11th chapter, the first of 5 chapters, he begins by describing the 30 qualities needed in every human being. For someone to be accepted as a human being, he must develop these 30 qualities. And of course, the first of those 4, the first 4 of those 30 qualities deal with the 4 basic principles, which are, of course, described in the Bhagavatam as the pillars of dharma. So it's just like within our own, let's say, ISKCON society, unless we have our own devotees understand, not only understand, but follow these 4 principles of dharma, then we cannot expect actual good results. We were discussing the need, let's say, for gurukulas, for example. But gurukula, the responsibility for gurukula is not simply the teacher who's in the gurukula teaching these boys. The responsibility for gurukula begins with the parents who will conceive such living entities to take birth in a pious family, in a Vaishnava family, and who will therefore have the natural tendency and qualities and abilities to be nicely trained in Gurukula. So in this way, there's a whole, in many ways, we can say that such type of training for both, the training, of course, was especially for three categories within society, something we have yet to properly understand, you know. Those, of course, here it is stressing the importance that no one is meant to lord it over. That does not mean, however, that some individuals are not meant to be leaders. To be a leader does not necessarily mean to lord it over, isn't it? Because in the Vedic culture, leadership is especially given to those who are especially understanding their position as servants, isn't it? The whole philosophy, which one of our leaders, especially, who is no longer with us, His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, has written quite extensively, actually, on the concept of leadership. And he emphasized especially this aspect of servant leader. A leader is meant to be first and foremost an ideal servant, because he knows that that is the underlying principle for anyone, especially for a leader within society. Servant, servitor leadership. Actually, that's also nicely described in the Bhagavad Gita, that Krishna is described as a supreme personality of Godhead, and his representative, the Guru, the spiritual master, is described as a supreme personality of servitor Godhead. Servitor Godhead. So only those who have this proper understanding of servitorship should be placed in leadership position, isn't it? Therefore, it is only the dvijas, you know. There are three categories of dvijas, as we know, described in the Shastra, who are meant to be the natural leaders in society, and only they can be or should be the leaders because they are spiritually qualified. Dvija means one who has, who is twice born, one who has accepted spiritual training, one who has received the sacred thread, and one who is every day, just like in this Kautilya Arthashastra that I sent you. It is nicely described how, actually, we read about when we celebrate, for example, the appearance or disappearance of some of our great acharyas, like Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. We have more information about their activities, and especially we see how they had a very strict daily schedule, you know. Modern day people don't have a daily schedule that they follow very strictly, beginning at 4 o'clock in the morning. So when we study the lives or the schedule, the daily schedule of kings, traditionally, that's actually described in detail in our Shastra. One of those books, the Kautilya Arthashastra, which is the science, we could say the science of governance, you know, the science of Kshatriyahood. And there it mentions that actually a king, 3 times a day he would be spending time with Shastra. 3 times a day. I mean, we're doing good if once a day as brahmanas. We open the book. I mean, besides Bhagavatam, that's besides Bhagavatam class. So 3 times, because the foremost duty and responsibility of a king, the complete opposite of what Hiranyakashipu is planning here, is to uphold the principles of dharma. And Hiranyakashipu, because of his demoniac mind, he wants to destroy. He wants to completely destroy the principles of dharma and also the established principles in the universe. Just like Dhruvaloka is mentioned here. Dhruvaloka is a planet that is not destroyed. But he wants, people who are adharmic, they just want to do the opposite of what is dharma. That's the easy characteristic of demonic personalities. They just want to do the opposite of what is meant to be established. So therefore, one needs to know what is meant to be established. Means one needs to know what is dharma. And that is especially the responsibility of the dvijas. Therefore, the importance of creating dvijas, isn't it? The importance of creating individuals who have these particular responsibilities. Of course, one may say, well, if we create Vaishnavas, then that covers everything. Yes and no. I mean, yes, in that a Vaishnava, we understand, is automatically someone meant to demonstrate the qualities of a Brahmana, you see. But Brahmanas are meant to guide society. They're not meant to organize society. They're not meant to to take up the responsibilities of Kshatriyas, for example. I mean, in some rare cases in the history that is described in the Bhagavatam, but there is a natural sequence or a natural order that is given by Krishna, which is called the order of varnas and the order of ashramas, isn't it? And therefore, the importance of having these natural leaders, beginning with qualified brahmanas, qualified kshatriyas, and qualified vaishyas, we are lacking, especially in qualified kshatriyas and qualified vaishyas, and we definitely need to work on brahmanas also. Although the focus has been largely up to now, that was Prabhupada's mood and mentality, of course, understanding very well that we begin with the topmost level. We begin with the head. Unless the head is in proper position, as Prabhupada would say, unless there's a head on society, then the whole society cannot function properly. But it's not sufficient or complete simply to have the head or the brahmanas. The brahmanas are meant to also facilitate or create leaders who will actually execute, and especially that is why kshatriyas are meant to study on a daily basis what is dharma, because they are meant, their foremost duty and responsibility is to uphold the principles of dharma, to actually protect dharma in all its different ways or different levels, beginning by protecting the principles of dharma based on these qualities that we were mentioning. Well, the whole Bhagavatam description of Parikshit Maharaj, isn't it? Parikshit Maharaj, uh, just at the beginning of Kali Yuga, as we recall, was, took out his sword when he saw one cow and one bull being abused. So, protection of dharma begins by protecting and arranging so that these four principles, of dharma, these four pillars of dharma, that are described as satyam, daya, tapa, socham, that these are protected. Then other aspects of protection are there, of course, in terms of protecting citizens, protecting property, protecting the land, protecting cows. So many things need to actually be protected when there is a proper governance, isn't it? Proper governance. So it is very much also the duty and responsibility of brahmanas or society that is meant to be promoting Brahminical culture to arrange in different ways or to facilitate that these, we could say, the components of what makes up a full and balanced society, that these are in place. Yeah. I will read the text, and if there's any comment or question, we can discuss a little bit. So once again, these are demigods, some of the demigods speaking to Lord Brahma. O Lord, we have heard from reliable sources that in order to obtain your post, Hiranyakashipu is now engaged in severe austerity. You are the master of the three worlds. Please, without delay, take whatever steps you deem appropriate. Yeah. Any comments or questions on this? Yes.
Just like as I heard so far, there is a system. Guru decides whether he is a Brahmana based on what is Kshatriya Vaishya.
Guru decides.
Yes. In the pre-olden days, it's not based on the birth. He becomes a Brahmana, right?
Okay. Yes.
So after that, he is sent to Gurukula. Guru, based on teaching and his qualification, he decides whether he is a Brahmana or a Kshatriya Vaishya.
Right.
So like that, now we have the system that Guru is giving Brahman Diksha. It's like
Right.
according it, it's according the Brahman Diksha as well as recognizing as a Brahmana.
Yes.
Likewise, do we have system to be introduced or suggested by Srila Prabhupada to recognize Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, of course Shudras, I don't know, at least 3 categories.
Here's what Prabhupada mentioned. Good question that you're mentioning that within our ISKCON society and previously also it was to determine the Varna. We're speaking about Varna here, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. To determine the Varna of an individual, we understand that it is not by birth, as you rightly mentioned, but that it is by qualification, and that is assessed and determined by Guru. So the traditional system was that in a village where there are brahmanas, it was the responsibility of brahmanas are the natural gurus within society. They're the natural guides. So guru means one who is giving guidance, instruction. So it was the brahmanas who would actually determine which varna a young boy belongs to, regardless of course, I was going to say regardless of which family he was born in, but Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains that generally, before the age of 15, a young boy was assessed, and part of that assessment, of course, was what was his family lineage. So it is not that automatically, because he's born, let's say, in a Kshatriya, it comes from Kshatriya lineage, that he will necessarily be, but when society was properly arranged, there were good chances that he would be. And so Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains that normally one born in a Brahmana family or Kshatriya family, he would be designated as a Brahmana or Kshatriya. But that could be changed depending on what qualities he manifests either before being designated or even afterwards. Yeah. So your question is, let's say, in the context of ISKCON society. Well, within our society at present, we do not have a system of identifying anyone other than a Brahmana. I mean, we don't have any, the initiation system we have within ISKCON right now is only for appointing or designating someone as a Brahmana. However, Srila Prabhupada did instructed and wanted that we introduce a training system to also identify, and he uses the word, we will designate individuals either as Brahmana, Kshatriya, or Vaishya. As Srila Prabhupada explained, because that question was, similar kind of question was asked, you know, in the context of varnashrama. It's like, where do we start? How do we do this? You know, one devotee was asking the question. So Prabhupada says, it's very simple. He says, you just consider that everyone is unqualified. And actually we are. So it's not a big problem. You know, Prabhupada said, actually, just consider everyone as rascal. You know? And then you introduce 3 training systems. One training system for Brahmana, and a particular curriculum for Brahmana. Another training system for Kshatriya, and a third one for Vaishya. And then you invite everyone, okay, anyone can take the training, and whoever passes, whoever actually is successful, then he is designated, he is recognized, he is, we could say, kind of like labeled as either Brahmana, just like in our society, anyone who takes, you know, Bhakti Shastri course or takes different courses, then at the end of the day, you know, he gets a Brahmana thread. We call it a Brahmana thread because we don't have a Kshatriya thread system or a Vaishya thread system. But we need to start thinking about this because Prabhupada wanted that we introduce these, especially these 3 cultures. Brahmana culture, Vaishya culture, Brahmana culture, Kshatriya culture, and Vaishya culture, you see. By introducing these cultures, it means we will designate, recognize individuals, and they will take on particular positions and responsibilities. Whoever does not qualify, automatically Shudra, you see. But Shudra is also a culture, you know. The Dvija culture is a culture of leadership with a proper understanding of servitorship, highest servitorship. They accept leadership to actually ultimately serve Krishna. So those are the natural leaders within a Vaishnava Varnashrama culture actually. Vaishnava culture does not negate Varnashrama, should not negate Varnashrama. So the natural leaders are those within those 3 categories. And the rest of the population, they're not by nature meant to take up those leadership positions. Automatically, by nature, they are meant to be ideal servants. So these are the two, we could say, categories. The leadership responsibility, and then the servitorship responsibility. In other words, within the Vedic culture, for society to function properly, there needs to be natural leaders and there needs to be natural servants. And when we know that we're serving Krishna, it's not, the Brahmana is also serving Krishna, the Kshatriya is serving Krishna, he's serving Krishna in a leadership position. Whereas one who is not in that leadership position, he is in a servitorship position, serving those leaders who are in a in the same mood or position of servitorship to Krishna. So in other words, when we're all serving Krishna, that is the whole intent or purpose of Daiva Varnashrama. Daiva Varnashrama is that same system of Varna and Ashrama. It's not that Daiva Varnashrama is like no Varnas and no ashram. Daiva Varnashrama means the same Varnas, the same duties and responsibilities of Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, but all focused on serving Krishna. Therefore, there is no undue and unnecessary friction or clash between the Varnas. Yeah. So this would have manifested by this time. By 50 years down the line, because we are 50 years. We celebrated 2016, the golden jubilee of ISKCON. We would already have this in place had we followed the instruction of Prabhupada to establish Varnashram colleges. Varnashram colleges were meant and are meant today to train individuals in these four cultures, actually. Brahmana culture, Kshatriya culture, Vaishya culture, and Shudra culture. And when we artificially try to negate or not even, when we don't follow the orders of Guru, because Prabhupada gave that instruction, then we will not obviously get the kind of desired result. Prabhupada wanted that we institute and establish Varnashram colleges for the purpose of gradually introducing this culture. This is the Vedic culture. Vedic culture is not something archaic, something that existed before and is no longer relevant today, as some would want us to believe. Veda is eternally Veda. Veda means knowledge. Vedic means knowledge based on Vedic literatures. And of course, the topmost and foremost of all, or the cream of this Vedic knowledge is the Bhagavatam, isn't it? Yeah. So we are speaking about Vedic culture. We're speaking about Vedic villages. We're speaking about the temple of Vedic planetarium. So who can deny that we're not Vedic? Some people, want to argue, no, we're not Vedic. We are Vedic, means followers of the Vedas, you see. In the scholarly world, they have categorized, Vedic period was, bygone days. Now we're living in modern times. What was applied before in the so-called Vedic era is no longer practical, no longer possible. This is, some element of that is true. However, for example, what I was mentioning a little earlier, the foremost responsibility of parents, if we want to actually beget good progeny so that they will be ideal students in Gurukula, the samskaras, the Garbhodhana samskara, which was strictly followed previously, and which is like the beginning and the foundation of all the different samskaras. So one may argue, well, this was for the Vedic times, and nowadays we don't have to follow this. Okay, that's illogical. That's a total insanity. Those samskaras are there, are eternally there for helping individuals become dharmic, isn't it? Samskaras are purificatory activities that are meant to purify. So this remains, we could say, we use the expression standing order. Standing order means it's an instruction that has been given a long time, and it's still standing because no one has taken it up. It's a standing order to establish Varnashram colleges. It's a standing order to establish Gurukulas. It's a standing order to establish Vedic villages, as described in Gita Nagari, essay written by Srila Prabhupada. It's a standing order to become Krishna conscious. It's not something of the Vedic times. Now we're in modern times. We don't have to be Krishna conscious. That's insane. So this is the very thing that Hiranyakashipu here, he wants to change all of these principles. And that's because he's the maniac. So when we properly understand what we refer to as Sanatan Dharma, what is meaning of Sanatan Dharma? It means a dharma that is Sanatan, eternal, unchanging, based on eternal principles. Same thing for family nucleus, family life, isn't it? That was the whole argument that Arjuna was giving, not to fight. It will destroy, it will bring imbalance. Women will be unprotected. So that principle is, he was very concerned about this, Arjuna, and rightly so. At the same time, there was the principles of dharma, that the dharma had to be protected, and that the war of Kurukshetra had to be fought. So these principles of protecting, let's say, the family or protecting women was there in the Vedic times and still is there today. The family, the purpose of the family, which is to beget Krishna conscious children, was there in the Vedic times and still is there today, isn't it? So these principles are not changing. The science of economy that is described in the Vedic times, isn't it? That's also described in the Kautilya Arthashastra. The science of economy was based on Krishi Guraksha. Krishi Guraksha Vanijam, Vaisya Karma Swabhavajam. So that was there in the Vedic times. Does that mean that now we don't utilize, or we don't follow that now because now we're modern and we can do things differently? Well, yeah, the attempt has been made for the last 100 plus years to do things differently, and just we all know the results. The whole world is in crisis because we are deviating from the standard. Just on this point alone, economy. The whole world, including the vast majority of our devotee communities, of our devotee householders, are engaged in non-traditional occupations for the sake of economy, but wrong occupation. And therefore, it's creating havoc in so many ways. Does that answer your question?
Connected to this permission.
Connected.
I'm to ask.
But first, before, whether anyone
Yes,
else
yes,
has it.
no, just you can ask after me. Actually, you sent me that file yesterday, and I was just going through. I'm yet to begin the whole thing. I'm just going through the topics
Yeah.
which talks in the Kautilya. It speaks about vast, like the complete life. How actually, if we go through, if we are all at least basic training is given to us from this Arthashastra, we can actually get a very peaceful life. Why we have not spoken on what we have, why this information is not given to us? It's a very simple way of living within this life. Like I was thinking, we all, at least those who are living inside the temple, that is a different thing, but at least those who are living outside, at least at Gajna communities, we should be given some basic training from this Arthashastra. It is very much relevant, and why it is ignored? I think there should be sessions. Every one of us should be attending. Our own house is not in order, and now we are going to
Right.
do so many other things.
Yeah. Well, the proper answer is directly connected with the point I was making, that it was, our founder Acharya's desire that we introduce Varnashrama by establishing Varnashrama colleges. And therefore, again, had we done that, then we would have a much better, not only understanding, but we would be engaged in a different way, because especially our householders would have come to understand what is actually the proper way to be engaged, what kind of occupation I should have, where I should be living as a more natural and more ideal situation, which comes back to the concept we've been mentioning on a number of occasions, that our presence in the cities primarily should be for preaching, but we should otherwise, as family units, be living in the country, which is a natural environment for having our livelihood, meeting our different material necessities of life, and avoiding being entangled with the whole mess of modern day, urbanized and industrialized and materialistic oriented society, which is the primary goal being for so-called, material well-being and ultimately sense gratification. You see, so when we deviate, that's what happens. When we deviate from, if you're going on the highway and then you somehow get off the highway, well, God knows where you're going to end up. So the highway, so to speak, is the principles of dharma. The highway, the proper way, is the instructions given by the acharya, isn't it? And so naturally, when we don't follow that, that means we deviate. And then whenever we deviate from whatever it may be, the results are not going to be good, isn't it? So therefore, we need to, a personality like Srila Prabhupada, who was the founder acharya of our society, doesn't speak for nothing, doesn't give instructions that are not relevant, isn't it? So if we want to choose and pick what we feel is, relevant and not relevant, what is good or what is suitable, then we are grossly mistaken. And for that we have to suffer the different consequences that are there. So that can be rectified. That can be immediately rectified. It may take some time, of course, to get the kind of desired results that Prabhupada expected or wanted by taking up the instructions, standing orders left by Srila Prabhupada.
What I have been observing is most of us we try to do what Prabhupada used to do, but we hardly care for what he wants us to do. He wanted us to do so many things, but we never cared. I mean, most of us at least, we never cared for what he wanted us to do. We always think what he has done, what he has not done. Okay, he didn't go to the village, no, he didn't do this, so we will not do this.
But it's not true that Prabhupada did not go to the villages.
He never did the village preaching.
No, but Prabhupada did go to the villages, and Prabhupada did speak about villages, although his main focus was traveling around the world and establishing, in the major cities in the world. But that also we need to properly understand, and that's nicely explained in the introduction of speaking about Varnasrama, isn't it? So if people don't read these kind of instructions that are left by Srila Prabhupada and only stick to what they feel is convenient, for them, then we're missing the point. We're missing the mission, isn't it? The foremost duty and responsibility of a follower or disciple is to actually know, understand, and take up also the instructions given by the spiritual master.
Just a request, Mother. Is there any possibility that maybe after your busy schedule, you can take some 40 minutes at least once or twice a week about this Arthashastra weekend? Have some sessions.
Well, we've been giving a course on that in our Varnashram, VCO, Varnashram College Online. There. Yeah. I mean, I've given the course twice in English and once in French already. And that course can be given in other languages as well, or we can repeat. I think we have a recording of that. We are giving.
Various topics, because there's vast topics, like so many topics are there.
Well, yeah.
I spoke to one devotee. I asked him to make slides on this.
Right.
Like Chaitanya Amrita is doing work on this.
Right.
I asked him to make slides on these particular topics. So
Right.
it can be easy to.
Yes. And there are 5, and one can elaborate on each one of them.
File number 3 is missing. I think you're not.
Is it?
Yeah. 1, 2, 5, 4.
Okay.
Part 3 is missing.
Yeah. I'll send it. Yeah. You still have a question? Yes.
Time always. Regarding this is Dashavida Samskaras, Maharaj.
Yes.
It is theoretically discussed till now, as I heard. Do we have a small book? Because our devotees, like in this samskaras, that just following, and of course myself, everybody, the karmi methods, whatever the just existing system, nobody has a clear idea on this Dashavida Samskaras.
No. You may not have a clear idea, but we have. This is very much connected with the Department of deity worship within ISKCON. So you can contact the department, and there are devotees who are, knowledgeable about these samskaras, who are performing these different samskaras, and so therefore, they should be they should be known. Especially mostly the samskaras are for the grihastas. You see, most of the samskaras are for the householders, because they are connected with children, and therefore we have a number of devotees who have taken specific courses given by connected with the Department of deity worship. So you can inquire about that and get more information and find out which devotees are knowledgeable, and then you can consult with them. Yeah. Yes, one quick and last question.
Question for this answer. You are telling about regarding the standing orders of the Srila Prabhupada. We are methodically working for the organization. We do follow the standing fire orders. There will be standing fire orders. In the industry, anything goes wrong, there will be a fire is there. Then the standard standing fire orders. We have to do what we will do. And like that, Prabhupada ji is explained his standing fire orders to the ISKCON people. Already 50 years are gone. We are only emphasizing the trading the Brahmanas. We are not concerned about the emphasizing the Kshatriyas and Vaishyas. And recent incident in the attack of the Bangladesh, is it eye-opening to the ISKCON that we should have the Kshatriya department. And most of the temples, we are clearing the temples and we are depending on the donors. And we are running the temples. In the long run, it will not go. We should create the Vaishyas so that they can get the some food and fill the temples. Is it the recent attack to the Bangladesh is this is eye-opening to the ISKCON society?
Yes, actually, so many things that are taking place in the world today should be eye-openers. COVID should be an eye-opener. But in Kali Yuga, it's very difficult to open the eyes. Yes, I mean, the whole world is like crumbling under our very eyes, So all of these are meant to be eye-openers for us, and we generally say like this, that we have, the statement that we generally hear, which I feel is an incomplete statement, is that there is a spiritual solution to all the problems. What is more accurate to say is that there is both a spiritual solution and a material solution to all the problems, because we're living in the material world. If I have a stomach ache and somebody tells me there's a spiritual solution, to your stomach ache, okay, well, I'll chant Hare Krishna, but if I take some medical advice, then that will help, because my stomach is material. No. So there is, our Shastra are giving us both spiritual knowledge and material knowledge. And that's extremely and directly relevant to our situation today, where we are experiencing and suffering as a result of this imbalance between the spiritual and the material. This is historically, in the history of mankind, this has been the situation always. We hear about the what is it? The pendulum swing. The tendency is to go from one extreme to the other. Either we become totally spiritual or totally material. There's an in-between, because we're having to deal with both dimensions. We're having to deal with the spiritual, because we are that spirit soul inside this body, but we are indeed inside the body. We are indeed within the material world. So we cannot neglect the laws of the material world. The laws of the material world, in terms of our body, or the laws of the material world in terms of society, and how society is meant to be managed and governed. Yeah.
This is because of the Western education system, it is binary system, 0 or 1. So it's either 0 or 1.
Zero.
But Vedic system is you have both from zero, it's called fractional, to the one.
Yeah, yeah.
We have gunas also in between. Sometimes we ignore this and then we jump to the other extreme.
Right,
So these paradigms are either zero or one.
right,
We are going to this problem again. So it's either zero or one. Either you take it or leave it.
right,
But
right.
the Vedic system is there's a gradation in between actually.
Yes.
Gunas actually. Gunas comes.
Yeah, correct. Yes, yes.
One person used to come here in the last visit. One person used to come here and sit here every day. Most of the time for Bhagavatam class. Uh, he used to come to me also sometimes.
After the class?
So what actually happened later on, I could find that he comes here. He has some. His son is in the US and he has some visa issues. He is having some problems in his visa. So somebody has told him that you go to this Maharaj and he will, with his power, he will solve the visa issue.
His problem is solved?
So after he left from here and he went to Kamivanna, he came to my house also.
Okay.
He says, Swami, it is still there, the problem is still there. Can you do something? I said, see, I have some people in the department, I can talk to them. No, with some power you can do something. I said, this doesn't work like this. I said, you should not even meet such people with this intention that he will solve my visa issue.
Right. I mean, there is a connection, but there's also two realities to deal with. You know, the spiritual dimension and the material dimension. Although ultimately, material things are also governed, or unless we get the sanction of Krishna, even material things won't work ultimately. Okay. Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Jai Sri Prabhupada ki. Hare Krishna.